semi-variable costs, and stepped costs. Okay, so this is the purpose of knowing how costs behave, so that we can control these costs, we can plan and forecast for them, we can decide how much to produce, we can also decide the selling price, and we can decide whether to accept or reject certain jobs. Okay. So these are the three cost behaviors: fixed costs, variable costs, and mixed costs. Fixed costs are always the same. They are not dependent on output. So if your company is producing 5,000 units, fixed costs will be the same. If it's producing 10,000 units, the fixed costs stay the same. Okay, those are the total fixed costs. But when we look at fixed costs per unit, we're going to see that they will exhibit a different behavior. Similar with variable costs. The total variable costs are dependent on how much you produce. If you produce more, they increase. If you produce less, they reduce. But the per unit variable costs are going to exhibit a different behavior. Then mixed costs, okay, are a combination of the fixed and the variable costs. To a certain point it's fixed, then it becomes a variable after some time. Right, so we start with our fixed costs. As we can see, we've got a straight line here. Alright, so for example, let's say rent. If the rent of your factory is, let's say, $10,000, and though you produce 2,000 units, 1,000 units, 4,000 units, that rent is still going to stay the same. Okay, even depreciation, if you're using the straight line method, depreciation is going to still stay the same. Depreciation, the loss in value of assets. You've got property taxes, insurance, advertising, and supervisors' salaries. Alright, these are the fixed costs. They stay the same, they do not change. As you can see here in this graph here, they just stay straight like that. Now when we look at per unit fixed costs, something changes. Okay, the way we get our fixed cost per unit is our total fixed costs divided by the number of units. Okay, so what happens is, the more that we produce, the more the fixed costs get absorbed by the units. Okay, so the more that you produce, your fixed cost per unit is also going to start dropping. Okay, it's also going to start dropping. Right, this is what in economics we learned as economies of scale. Okay, when you produce more and your costs start to reduce, like these fixed costs. And listen, if we look at this graph here, yes, total fixed costs stay the same. Let's say it's $30,000, so they stay the same. Okay, but if we look at our fixed cost per unit, if we produce 5,000 units, okay, the total fixed cost will still stay the same, 30,000, but these 5,000 units are going to absorb this cost. 30,000 divided by 5,000, $6 per unit. If we produce 10,000 units, if we produce 10,000 units, our fixed cost still stays at the same, 30,000. But our fixed cost per unit is going to drop. Why? Because more units are absorbing this cost. Okay, so I say 30,000 divided by 10,000, you get $3 per unit. If you produce 15,000 units, your fixed cost, your total fixed cost will still stay the same, 30,000. But since since you produced more units, the fixed cost gets absorbed into those units. So 30,000 divided by 15,000, you get $2 per unit. Okay, so we have a graph like this for fixed cost per unit. The more units that you produce, the lower your fixed cost per unit, because the number of units are absorbing that fixed cost. Okay, any questions? Okay, we now go to variable costs. Okay, variable costs, as we said, that dependent on the number of units that you produce. Okay, produce more, they increase. You produce less, they reduce. Okay, but we want to find out how variable costs per unit act. Okay, so remember, variable cost per unit, VC per unit, is your total variable costs, TVC, total variable cost, divided by the number of units. Right. So let's look at this table here. Okay, if you produce 5,000 units, your variable cost will be 10,000. So variable cost per unit is $2. 10,000 divided by 5,000, you get $2. Okay. If you increase production from 5,000 units to 10,000 units, basically you have doubled production. All right. Even your total variable cost is going to increase from 10,000 to 20,000. Variable cost per unit, 20,000 divided by 10, $2. Okay, if you increase the units produced again by 5,000 units, the variable cost increases to 30,000. Variable cost per unit, 30,000 divided by 15,000, $2. Okay, so here the increase is a constant increase. That's why the variable cost is staying the same, right? We're increasing our number of units by 5,000. Okay, so our cost is increasing by 10,000. So the change is just constant. That's why you're going to get a straight line like this. Okay, but in reality it won't be straight like this. You might get a line something like this. It might go up and down like that, but it will exhibit almost something similar to a straight line. Okay, if the increase is at a constant amount. So variable cost per unit, as you can see, this is their graph here, and total variable costs, this is their graph. Okay, so it's important to know how these costs behave. All right, because cost accounting and management accounting, cost accounting is all about tracking and managing costs. Management accounting is about making decisions. Okay, so now we're going to go to the mixed cost, or what is called semi-variable cost. All right, a semi-variable cost, which is also called a mixed cost. To a certain degree, to a certain level, they stay fixed, but above this level they become variable. Let me give a proper example to illustrate this. Let's say you have a garbage company that collects bins, okay, and let's say the cost per month is going to be $10 for every three bins you have. You can have 1, 2, or 3 bins. Between 1 to 3 bins, you'll be paying $10. Okay, so when they come to collect, you put your 3 bins out there, and collect, and your charge is $10 every month for that. But then they tell you this: any bins beyond 3 bins, is going to add an extra charge of $2. Okay. If you have 4 bins, you're going to need to put an extra $2. If you have 5 bins, you have to put an extra $4. Okay. So from 1 to 3 bins, your cost is fixed, it's at $10. But if you have more than 3 bins, if you have, let's say, 5 bins, it means $2 for each of these bins. You have to pay an extra $4, because they're saying $2 per bin after you cross over 3 bins. All right. Okay, so it's $2 per bin. So if you have four bins, you pay first the $10 for the first 3 bins, then you pay an extra $2 for the 4th bin. If you have 5 bins, you pay $10 for the first 3 bins, and you pay $4 for the extra 2 bins, making your total bill 14. So that's a mixed cost. Okay, a combination of fixed and variable. They stay fixed to a certain range, and they become variable afterwards. And then we've also got what we call stepped costs. Okay, these are fixed costs, but they tend to increase over after a certain range. Okay, but they still remain fixed. For example, let's say, for example, let's say you have a factory, okay, and every 10 workers need a supervisor. Okay, for every 10 workers, you need 1 supervisor. So this supervisor's salary, let's say, to be $10,000. Okay. So if your factory has got 10 workers, you only need 1 supervisor, and you'll be paying him $10,000. Okay. This is from 0 to 10 workers, right? If you have 11 to 20 workers, alright, you're going to need a second supervisor, meaning you have to pay an extra $10,000. Okay. Then if you're going to have 21 to 30 workers, put it like this. Okay. So from 0 to 10 workers, 1 supervisor, 10,000. From 11 to 20 workers, you're going to need 2 supervisors. So the salaries now become 20,000. Okay. From 21 to 30 workers, from 21 to 30 workers, you're going to need 3 supervisors. That will be $30,000. So this is how stepped costs work. Okay, they are fixed, but they increase over certain